It began in Cordoba in Argentina and was discontinued due to the pandemic and postponed for 2021. It's a worldwide initiative which I welcome you to look out for, because a lot of people used to go there in person. As you know, now we're doing a lot of things virtually and adapting. So Emilio was just telling us a bit about how they intend to carry it out with the current scenario. He'll be giving us more information and we will send it on to you, because I think this group will probably be very aware and very conscious of these topics once we've finished. So I think all of you will probably be interested in taking part in this forum and in talking about it. Well, Paula, Emilio, I think we can get started. I'm not sure if you'd like to make a brief introduction, and if not, I will get started. Okay, no, you go ahead. Okay, well, hello to everyone and a very warm welcome to you all to this second webinar of the course. We are now coming to the end of the second week. And as I was saying to Emilio earlier, it's been very positive. This weekend was busy for Mailing and other colleagues and Alejandro, who've been working together to try and give feedback to everyone for today. And as Paula mentioned in one of her emails, the idea is for Mailing to give back everyone's work, everyone's contributions, make a bit of feedback. And then we will open the floor to debate, discussion, questions, and reflection. So before I give the turn to speak to Mailing, I'd like to remind you that this afternoon, later this evening, Paula will be uploading the activities for Unit 3. We will be working on social and solidary economy over the next few weeks, over the next week. As always, you will have a document about what we're going to be doing and a practical exercise. In the first few days, there'll be a forum in which you can debate for a week. And then at around Wednesday or Thursday, we will upload a Google form, a Google survey, so that you can share your experiences. So as always, I'd like to encourage you all to take part in this learning process, in which, as I was saying last week, it is everyone's individual responsibility to get involved and to save a little bit of time in your busy schedules to read the materials that we send you. We know that you're having a hard time in the midst of this pandemic and everyone is coming to the end of a very complicated year. So let's do what we can with the energy we have left. So after this brief introduction and sending out a very big thank you to everyone who has got involved over the past week, I'm going to give the floor to Mei Ling Yuen, who is a Chilean colleague who, like Alejandro, is devoted to green economy. She has a lot of experience in the public and private sector. And together they have put together the materials that you've been sent to read, the practical exercises. And now what they'll be doing is giving back those exercises and entering a debate, a discussion with you. So Mei Ling, the floor is yours to carry on as you wish. Thank you, Pablo.
Hola, bienvenidos.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. I'd also like to say thank you for all the participation that we've received and for all the experiences you've shared with us over the past few days. It was very rewarding, very gratifying to see all the documents that you've sent us and the projects that you are carrying out in your countries and regions. It would be very interesting if each one of you could read your projects, your experiences, because there are very diverse experiences that have been sent in, which can contribute a lot to this module on sustainable production projects and modules. We decided to hold this webinar with the chance for you to share some of your experiences and also to raise questions that will explore some of these topics in greater depth.
Y a partir
We
con
would like to start
de
with
Barcelona,
an experience from Barcelona, which was shared by David de la Varga, Octavi de la Varga, sorry, which has a lot to do with what we're experiencing in the midst of this pandemic and the crisis, the health crisis, the social crisis. Octavi was talking about buying close to home in local businesses and how all this COVID situation
las
has
ciudades, el desarrollo
fostered local development. It has strengthened the concept of neighborhoods, of smaller scale economies, and how also we've seen a difference between neighborhoods that are very closely tied to tourism, for instance, and other neighborhoods that are more community spirited,
relata
where,
diferencias bien
according to Octavi, some very positive experiences have developed in both cases, in fact. Here is Octavi, he switched on his camera. So I would love to hear from him just a bit of a brief summary of the learnings that they have taken away from the whole process. And also, I'd like to ask him about market sustainability, about the source of a product, its ecological footprint, environmental footprint, because apart from the economic and social factor, of course, these initiatives also have an environmental impact and an environmental benefit, which can be very interesting to explore and to further. So we wanted him to just share a bit more about that. Well, good afternoon from here in Barcelona in Spain, and thank you so much for inviting me to share my experience. In the first place, it was a comparative action in which in Barcelona we found that which neighborhoods that had become more tourist based, which is the theme park Barcelona, as I like to call it, there are a lot of shops that are focused, are targeted towards a specific segment of buyers, and now they are completely shut down. There's no life in them at all. And our offices in Metropolis are located in the Gothic region, the Gothic neighborhood. For those of you who know Barcelona, that's behind the city hall. And there's a school, there's a pharmacy, and that's all that's open at the moment. That and us in our offices. Everything else is completely dead. It's totally quiet. However, in neighborhoods where there is a community where people live, these smaller businesses, smaller shops are still open. So that teaches us a little bit about gentrified neighborhoods and living neighborhoods. And this campaign that we carried out, which has been accelerated by COVID-19, which is about buying locally, about buying locally sourced products, and about what you were saying about market sustainability. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in my written text, but there was a small contradiction. There was something that we haven't managed to find an answer for. And it's thinking that just because we have a neighborhood market or a neighborhood store, it is automatically sustainable and everything is 0 kilometer or locally sourced. But often that's not the case. Sometimes they are not as sustainable as we think, and these municipal stores often specialize in more local and more sustainable products in an effort to improve that, as well as organic products. But as I was saying, that's not always the case. They're not entirely sustainable, and I think that's something that needs to be solved in, especially in big cities, because these locally sourced stores need to also be linked to the idea of sustainability, of local producers, organic production, and environmentally friendly production. And there's also another element which is very positive in this campaign, which is that it will be creating digital platforms to encourage online purchasing, but from local businesses. So it's a bit like they're trying to compete with these massive platforms that are taking over the entire market. And what I think needs to be done is a lot more awareness raising among the citizenship, among society, to really understand the importance of what this means. I'm not sure if that answers your questions, Mei-Ling.
Sí, y
Yes,
también
fantastic. It does. Of course, I think this can also be an opportunity to promote local businesses, make them more sustainable. And I think there is an opportunity here to reach out to new clients and to improve life in these neighborhoods. Well, yes, I didn't mention this in my case scenario, in my case study that I mentioned, but it can be some sort of trick. We could fall into the trap of thinking that they are all so sustainable, organic, and environmentally friendly. often these initiatives, especially in Barcelona, are geared towards not so much the general public, the public at large, but people with a certain financial purchase power. So certain products that appear to be very available to everyone are actually very highly priced, and so they further this difference between social classes, and there are people who cannot afford to access them. Yes, exactly, that's a good point. Well, now I can share a project that we've been undertaking in Chile, which is called Al Gramo, which is about package-free sales, and it focuses on small local warehouses in the neighborhoods, and it has an online platform that has been very successful. It's been very popular, and it really reaches that segment of people who don't necessarily have the resources to pay more. As Octavio was saying, this project can it can provide more affordable prices. Thank you so much, Octavi, for sharing your thoughts. Does anyone have any comments for Octavi?
Si no me pueden ir interrumpiendo.
You can feel free to interrupt me at any time, and I'll carry on in the meantime. Another case which we thought was very interesting was shared by a colleague from Slovenia, who mentioned that several years ago they had a sustainable urban development project at a national level. And although the concept of circular economy wasn't included in its design, it did start to address actions that were comprehensive in their scope and to help move forward in this topic and progress. We were also struck by her conclusions, which for us are extremely relevant to the success of this initiative. She mentioned that political leadership and citizen awareness and financing were the three key factors for these kind of initiatives and experiences to be scalable and replicable. So I'm not sure if Miriam is with us. I think I saw her. Oh, Miriam. I'm not sure if this person can hear us.
Yep, I can hear you.
Sí. Entonces, lo que queríamos preguntar es qué rol ha jugado los privados y qué importancia ves tú.
What we wanted to ask was what role has been played by private sector, and what about this relationship between public and private sector?
Yeah, so our experience regarding sustainable urban development strategies, well, it started with being like a precondition for European financing. So without this strategy, cities could not receive funding from the EU. But this precondition actually started a very lively and participative process, which meant a qualitative step forward in how our municipalities addressed strategic planning. It was maybe the first real time when the public was consulted in a really good manner. With the process lasted more than like 2 years for each city to prepare their strategy. So this was a really good exercise and really meant a step forward in how our municipalities worked. At the time, circular economy was not yet such in focus, but in recent times, the government, cities, and the European Union as a whole is moving more and more towards this circular economy subject and goals. And our cities will start to renovate these strategies soon, and will definitely include also circular economy. So the engagement of private entities was mainly in the part of strategy preparation, while which also includes like an action plan or a list of projects to be implemented. These projects are the bigger projects are being funded by the European Union and state funds. Smaller projects are implemented directly by the municipalities. Is this clear?
Sí, muy claro. Y ahí en esos proyectos...
Yes, very clear. And in those projects between the private sector and municipalities, do they work on a parallel basis or do they work together?
Unfortunately, I cannot give you exact information. I'm more involved in those projects that are financed directly by the EU, so which are public-led. So I can't tell you much about how these private public initiatives are conducted on the in practice. What I do know about circular economy or constraints of circular economy is, as I mentioned, these restrictions of jurisdiction. How do cities involve local partners from the business sector? Usually, the circular economy changes or projects are limited to public companies, but they won't be enough to achieve real change or real goals.
Claro. Perfecto. Muchas gracias, Miran.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Miran.
¿Comentarios a
I'm
Miran?
not sure if anyone has any comments for Miran about this initiative. If not, we'll carry on with Alejandro, who has just joined us. Hello, everyone. Good morning to all of you. Thank you, Paula, Pablo. I apologize for joining you so late, but here we are to share the progress of all of the information we've received over the weekend. I think Osama is with us today because we had a question for him.
No sé si hay un solo Osama.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
not sure if there's
I
just
listen to
one
you.
Osama, however.
I listen to you.
Osama Tabach.
Osama Tabash, de la Municipalidad de Abasán.
Osama Tabat from Abasan.
¿Está con nosotros?
Ahí está
¿No?
presente.
Is
Sí,
he with
está.
us? Yes, here he is.
No, estuvimos compartiendo un ida y vuelta.
Well, we had an exchange of ideas this weekend. Osama was talking to us about a project of an olive production plant with local farmers.
De desarrollo local territorial con una
So it's a
fuerte
local territorial development project which has a strong focus on ecosystem regeneration.
Osama nos comentaba
Osama was talking to us
que está trabajando en
about the fact that he's working on developing the equipment, bettering the infrastructure, developing capabilities of farmers and better products, and that they are also including this circular economy concept. And we wondered about making use of the pip of the olive. And we had a question which we decided to leave for today, which is what are the indicators that you use to measure the evolvement of this project in terms of environmental factors, social and economic? What's the impact in terms of employment, in terms of acres reforested, and also on income of the people, the farmers who are taking part in the project?
Osama está, pero tiene su micrófono
I
en
think
silencio.
Osama is with us, but his microphone is on silent. I'm not sure if he's able to talk to us.
Vamos con otra bueno, lo dejamos ya instalado para que
Well, we
Osama,
can leave that question
por el chat,
in the air so that Osama can answer us whenever he can, or he can raise his hand. He can write perhaps the answer in the chat box. And if you like, we can move on to another of the practical projects. Maigling, do you have one to share with us?
Sí, otro caso que nos llamó la
Yes,
atención,
another case that we were interested by and which
porque
we discussed a bit about
incluía el trabajo
was a
con recicladores de base.
project using
Nos mencionó
grassroots
María
waste pickers. It was Maria Eugenia
señalaba
Ordóñez who shared this with us. She was talking about a series of actions and initiatives towards the circular economy, although she mentioned that not all of them are very well developed. We are already seeing a certain integrality, of a certain comprehensiveness of this municipal management. And one of the cases she was talking to us about was an alliance with the Recyclers Association, together with the municipality, in which the municipal council provided them with a space to work in, and enabled these grassroots waste pickers to separate the waste and commercialize it. And with this, they developed a very organized project together with this Association of Waste Pickers that was very fruitful in developing a more sustainable waste management. And in relation to this is not just a municipal project. It has a certain higher level structure with other players, with other agents. I wanted to see if Maria Eugenia is with us and listening to us. Yes, here I am. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Yes, we can hear you. What we wanted to ask was, how did you hold this discussion with these cooperatives of waste pickers and recyclers? Because sometimes they appear to share common goals, but in the long term, there are nuances and difficulties that come up in the process. So what did you learn? What did you take away from this project? And this intention of including waste pickers in the whole management process, how does that work? Well, this is a very complex topic to talk about. I think there is translation for those who don't understand me in Spanish, but the reality is that at the moment, the situation is complex. This association of recyclers, of waste pickers, has been in operation for over 15 years in our region. It has been formally organized, and through this project, what we did was we provided subsidies, money for each of the waste pickers for the work that they do. This subsidy, this money that they are paid, is in reality 95% of their income of these waste pickers. That's 95% of all the money they earn. And this means that the recycling process isn't really entirely sustainable because there isn't enough motivation for people to recycle. And I am a production secretary in the regional council. But this is a very cross-sector topic because it also includes planning, services, all of the waste disposal concept. And our region, Bariloche, is very, very vast. It's very large, which means that collecting waste is costly. And although this association has a truck, has a lorry to collect the waste, it is difficult to withdraw the waste. It is costly, even once they've already been classified and separated. That's at least the reality in certain places. So at the moment, we are rethinking our entire organization model because the bridge between the association and the government services who drop off this waste is very complex. So we're trying to launch a new awareness raising campaign where we have 150 containers for recycling in our region, but people are still throwing their waste into the wrong bins, into the wrong containers. So we're not receiving enough dry waste, solid waste, to really enable this landfill to function properly. So we've come to a point where the association has it has various workers who all work on an even basis. There isn't, let's say, a boss, there isn't a hierarchical supervisor, which adds the difficulty of how to control it, how to supervise this. So at the moment, there are over 60 or 70 people in this association, and they are not really managing to recycle very much. So with this difficulty, once we've already started paying someone, it's very difficult to pull back out again. And it's difficult, as I was saying, to strike the balance, which is what we're going to work on and revisit. So I don't think it's a model that others should be following at the moment. Thank you very much. Well, I can share with you what we're doing here in Chile. Here, the EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Act, was approved. And thanks especially to political incidents on behalf of these waste pickers, we managed to include them as official waste management professionals. And what they do is they collect this material and they are paid for the service they offer. So it's not a subsidy, which means that it's more of a contract relationship.
¿Pago cuánto?
Sorry, I'm afraid. How much do they earn?
Pago por servicio.
It's payment per service, which means that there is a payment associated to the work that they carry out, provided they collect a certain amount of tons of waste to make this effective. It's something that's just really been launched recently, but in our experience, we've found that it's a good way of working with recyclers
Ese pago está asociado a
and
metas. Así que
associating the payment they get with certain targets, with certain goals, seems to be a good idea. That's something we can share with you at the moment. It's a difficult balance, as you were saying, to strike, but I think that we are on the right path to make this successful. I'd like to add something. In Asia and in Latin America, people who are working on the streets and collecting waste in open air, this has now become a global reality. As Mylene was saying, there's an example of Chile or Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, where it would be interesting to establish a point of contact as someone who can give us an example of how to work in this sector. Let's move on to another experience. We have one that we'd like to share, although it's been discussed on the forum. We have Octavi from Barcelona, Octavi de la Varga. Yes, we've already spoken to him. Oh, you've already spoken to him. That's perfect. I missed it. What a shame.
Creo que ya no tenemos más, ¿no?
And I'm not sure if there were any others that we needed to discuss.
Creo que no.
Sí, quizás podríamos pasar ya al
Yes,
CAST.
I wonder if we could move on to the next point. Yes, in relation to the case studies that we shared with you, the cases of Colombia and Chile, does anyone have any questions, any observations they'd like to make in terms of what they thought were successful outcomes from these experiences?
Hi, may I speak?
Sí, sí, perfecto. Adelante.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, very interesting experiences. I think it's very important to keep in mind to make something successful in such cases, there are some requirements. In my opinion, I'm presenting what I think. There must be at the beginning political will from the state itself, the government, and from the elected officials at the municipal level. The decision must be there that they want to go through this whole process. And it shouldn't be subjected to the opinion of a mayor, for example, or private sector personnel. And it's important also to keep in mind the scalability of the initiative or the project. And it's also very important to have the legal framework which will arrange the whole relationship between the public and private entities. As Maria was saying, their initiative isn't something she recommends us to follow. Maybe the arrangement from the beginning wasn't the right one to adapt. And very important thing, the culture itself plays a very important role in such areas. There should be a mutual benefit and understanding. Starts with the citizen itself, ourselves, and ends up with the decision maker at the state level. This is all what I want to say. Thank you.
compartimos el análisis.
We can now share this analysis. It's interesting regarding these two projects. One regarding the presence of the state in the process. In one case, it was not, which is the Colombian case. This happened more than 50 years ago, and it was ahead of its time in recovery, restoration, and so on of ecosystems. And there was an example of leadership by the state in including lots of different players. And it's linked to what Abdallah was just telling us. We've seen that civil society organizations, especially in these topics linked to the circular economy, are beginning to take steps in some processes. They're getting together, they're making action to start new projects where the state guides them or at least supports them sometimes with a response, not always by leading the project, but by supporting them. Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to share?
Bien. ¿Te parece bien, Pablo? Podemos ir al
Do you
caso.
think that's enough, Pablo? And we can maybe move on to the case of Rafaela? Well, it's up to you and Mailing. I think it would be interesting to talk about it because, as we were saying in the webinar last week, the idea that we've been insisting on is that this should be very practical after a week of reading content. The idea is to be able to debate, and we think it's excellent for people to take part. So yes, we could now talk about this case study, and hopefully people will share their opinions, whether on the chat box or by raising their hand and speaking. So go ahead, Alejandro.
Compartir
Well, I
pantalla.
hope you will allow me to share my screens.
Ahí está Pauli, seguramente ya
I
te
think,
estará.
no doubt, Paula can help you with that.
Bárbaro. Mientras que me da Paula acceso, ahí me dio acceso.
Okay, so I can now share my screen,
Una
and
experiencia.
I'm going to show you an experience in the city where Pablo was born, incidentally, where Pablo was born and raised, and which we have had to take part in.
El caso de Rafaela y sus políticas
So the
socioambientales.
case of Rafaela and its environmental policies is an example that we're raising in order to foster some debate about a policy that is led by the local government. We could mention a whole series of difficulties that this region has. It has 120,000 inhabitants. It is the geographical center of the Santa Fe province in the northern part of Argentina. We could say it's the north, and it's, in terms of climate, it certainly is settled in the north of the country. So this is a city where there are about 1,200 milliliters of rain per year, and the temperatures in summer are around 40 degrees centigrade, just to give you an idea of how hot and dry it is. And this list of difficulties could vary, but these were the relevant difficulties at that time. However, they of course change from one day to another, from one year to another. Here, the last one could be COVID-19, the pandemic. That would also be a difficult factor to deal with. This city is quite well distributed with a lot of industry. There are over 500 industrial businesses, SMEs, large companies, a lot of exports. Every 15 inhabitants have one SME between them, so there's a very important primary sector linked to dairy products and farming, especially soy.
un entorno urbano.
And the urban area, as you can see in the picture, is quite compact. It's part of the moist pampa, one of the fertile areas in Argentina, which accounts for over 80% of exports from Argentina in this region.
Organizarlos en términos de oportunidades o de
And we
problemas.
could structure this according either to opportunities or to difficulties at an urban level, at a territorial or rural level, and also linked to the lack of fertile soils. That's one of the major difficulties. And globally, it should be concerning us the most, because when we want to talk about healthy eating and productivity and biodiversity and capturing CO2, a fertile soil is crucial in this, and this can be degraded globally. It is being degraded globally year after year, and now a lot of fertile soils have been lost, and it could take up to 1,000 years to try to recover just 1 centimeter of lost soil. The soil, after all, is life. It is synonymous with life and with the economic prosperity of Argentina, as is access to water. It's crucial for the urban metabolism. At the moment, there is no lack of access to water, but water isn't being collected in the city, but rather via an aqueduct that travels about 60 kilometers. And the quality of water is not very good. It has high mineral concentrations. And this city has medium to high financial income levels. There are mobility difficulties. There's a lot of traffic in the city center. Every family has at least 1 or 2 cars. And there is a barometer that measures how motorized transport is rising in the city center and is becoming more and more concentrated. And so it needs to have a better transport mobility system. This city consumes a lot of energy resources, a lot of non-renewable energy resources. And it has a lot to improve in this regard, which also includes waste management. This city generates about 100,000 tons of waste per year. And that, of course, is an environmental problem in how to process all this waste. And like other cities in Argentina, it has an energy mix based especially on fossil fuels and very little on renewables. This city has gone through a series of crises, but it has high employment, it's very innovative, it has a good public-private collaboration, there are different participation models and good governance models. So it's a very well-organized city in terms of urban growth, urban development, and there are good relations between the city and the rural environment as well. This city over the last 20 years has been working to include the more vulnerable segments of society, which is also a challenge. And I could go on talking about the different characteristics that make the model applied in Rafael, the city model applied in Rafaela, what it is that make it so special. In the city, they have been working on a series of proposals, environmental proposals and policies. It has focused a lot on abiding by the law, generating a regulatory framework in order to lessen environmental impacts and to make better use of resources. There has also been a stage linked to promoting the green economy and fostering incentives towards the 2030 agenda to make it a more sustainable city And that's how the Rafaela Sustainable Initiative began in 2009, 2010, when Pablo became one of the drivers, one of the key drivers of this initiative in the city. It has a very sustainable outlook. The idea is to make each decision sustainable. And at the moment, it is turning to a more restorative model that pays greater attention not only to the efficacy of processes, but also to the effectiveness of the system, to promote economic activities that have a positive impact in terms of social inclusion and also restoring the ecosystem. And in the center here, where you can see this globe, Rafaela is there at the moment with a series of different mechanisms to exchange ideas and to foster debate, acting as a transition between this model on the left, which is no longer good enough, which is a degenerative development model, and progressing towards a regenerative development model with a more restorative approach. And the first thing we have to do when we work on social environmental policies is, because the worst thing that could happen to this kind of area is to work solely on environment. What we have to be able to do is to have an influence in health, in employment, in safety policies. So in all kinds of sectors and all kinds of aspects, because we believe that it is a cross-sector affair. So this transitioning city model that is being defined in Rafaela, it's aimed to create a city that is steered towards progress and social welfare. The idea is to cover the basic needs of every citizen, whilst also taking care of our environment and having a healthier atmosphere. The city, back in 2010, considered a series of work lines, not with this entirely cross-sector systemic approach that I was talking about now, but more from an operational point of view, divided into different categories with the aim of including these topics on the agenda. Some of them are quite traditional, linked to waste management, education, renewables, expansion and care for the urban area and biodiversity, caring for water treatment, sustainable mobility with more sustainable means of transport, and education and environmental communication campaigns as well. So this is a picture of the city, and you can see there is clearly a well-defined periphery here with high productive levels linked to farming and agriculture. They are trying to change the use of soil, which was once for livestock, and focusing more on soy cultures, soy crops. So what are the aspects that really define this type of policies and which we could linger on now and share a bit more about now? I'd like to hear what your opinions are in this regard. And also, what are the takeaways that we can draw from this type of initiatives, this type of development? We've been talking about a process that's so far lasted about 10 years. So there has been some progress in institutionality, how it's been changing to a much more cross-sector approach, and there's now an institute that is trying to facilitate the whole process. And there is now a council that really tries to engage with political and social players. It encourages communication between the public and private sector. It encourages collaboration. It relies strongly on technology, and at this time that it is now a time to rethink the policy in the post-COVID scenario and to carry on looking ahead based on these impact indicators, which is very important when it comes to defining and designing these projects. It is important to have indicators that tell us what impact these policies are having. So this that I just summed up for you now, this concentrates some of the most important characteristics of this management model between 2009 and the present, which makes Rafaela more sustainable. And you can find all the information on a website, which is Rafaela-Sustainable. And there is a sort of logbook of everything that they have been achieving with their policies. There have been a lot of players involved, and that's been one of the main strengths in this program, as well as having stemmed from the regional secretariat of the environment. Another of the positive things has been all the social capital that have engaged, all of the social organizations that have taken part. The educational system has also been involved. And so surely there'll be a lot of work left to do, but this is one of the most outstanding values. And in terms of waste management, it's a very interesting city because it started with a more health-focused approach about waste management and how to keep waste pickers healthy. And now it's turning more towards the circular economy approach to entrepreneurship, to fostering these social entrepreneurs who are now included in cooperatives. And it also has a strong focus on industrialization. And here is a picture of a woman who is one of the benchmarks in this recycling system, who intends to connect different value chains and leverage opportunities for raw materials and how to make the most of this waste. They have been driving initiatives to make the most of biomass, biofuels, biogas using dairy products. They also have focused a lot on the regulatory aspects, on the social aspects, employment, social inclusion, strengthening social initiatives. By making the most of these materials, which started with only solid waste and moved on to industrial waste, agricultural waste, ultimately scaling up and leveraging new synergies, also including household waste. And Rafaela only accounts for 5 to 6% of waste generation. Household waste is only 5 to 6% of waste. So the time comes to change something when this is the case and when we can use materials to create energy and also to create jobs. So another important axis of the work that they've been doing is the multiplicity of different activities that they've been taking part in and all of the different players that they've involved. Rafaela also has a program called Rafaela Entrepreneurial Projects to make it more sustainable. And although these two projects have never actually come together because it hasn't focused on entrepreneurship, there is now a new program, which is this Rafaela Entrepreneurial Spirit, that is trying to drive all of the capabilities that the city has to innovate, to structure and develop new companies, and that focuses its gaze on the circular economy. Of course, these are topics that were laid on the table and then developed and backed by public institutions as well to boost entrepreneurship in Rafaela. They have a strong will to develop the capabilities of these entrepreneurs. with these new kinds of small businesses targeting young people between the ages of 20 and 30. And these are companies whose DNA focuses a lot on the social impact and the financial impact of the things they do. No doubt there are new economies that Rafaela will have to be considering, not only the circular economy in terms of its impact, but also others, such as bioeconomy, biotechnology, and other disciplines that must be included in this entrepreneurial scope. Another initiative is linked to mobility, to changing the transport means to make them more sustainable. It's the idea of the 15-minute city, which intends to decentralize the way people live and work, and to boost a bit more activity in the peripheral areas on the outskirts of the city, including administrative offices, sports facilities, because of course this will have an impact on whether a city is sustainable or not. They've also been trying to create quality public spaces, and this picture illustrates the situation. This is the central square in the city with these cobbled streets, which have been declared a heritage site, and they've been recently repaired, and making these pedestrianized streets makes it, of course, much more sustainable. And the city, of course, is nothing without its public spaces. A city that has highlighted the value of trees in the urban center, designing circuits to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists. It hasn't been a difficult idea to define, but it has been difficult to execute because, of course, it requires a lot of work, a lot of discussion, debate with different sectors, including people who are directly affected by these cyclist lanes and pedestrian lanes. I think that this has yet to be completed. There's work left to be done to prioritize the citizen perspective and make people more aware of not using so much private transport, but work has been well underway. As I was saying about urban trees, what better investment could there be to improve the health situation than investing in green infrastructure? Of course, it is the most financially sensible system. The city is 140 years old, and it is now the time over the next 2 decades to rejuvenate its trees, because some of them are coming to the end of their life cycle, or in some places trees have been cut down in some areas and they should be replaced. Also, diversifying the type of tree species and the urban forest, so to speak, that's one of the tasks that they're working on in Rafaela, discovering what other types of species of trees could live there. There's also a tree law and a reforestation policy and forest care policy that doesn't only focus on the landscape scenic aspect, but also reducing the temperature and improving the quality of life of people in Rafaela, as well as improving air quality, because of course trees have a direct impact on air quality in any city. So there is a lot of work going on in Rafaela. They've also tried to adapt to climate change, involve urban agriculture as well. There have been several natural disasters, sadly, in this area, as in other regions of Latin America. Disasters that have been linked to, especially to flooding, to strong winds or extreme winds. So it has an early alert system. And you can imagine how important this is for a city that's far away from volcanoes and from the mountains. There is still work left to be done, and it is already underway to improve this urban grid to make it not only a consumer but also a producer of quality in the city, which is why they're working on, as I was saying, developing urban agriculture. The city has this intention to take urban agriculture to every corner of the city. In terms of energy, I'm just going to skip through this very quickly. The city, of course, wishes to diversify its energy mix because about 60 years ago, Rafaela generated enough energy. It was self-sufficient. It wasn't renewable, but it was self-sufficient. Whereas now, more than 98% of the energy consumed comes from fossil fuels. And so there is plenty of potential to use the sun in order to heat up water. And there are initiatives being done to achieve this. There's also a regulatory framework that has been defined to grant access to spaces that are high consumers of energy. And so, for instance, to put solar panels on buildings. And of course, there's an opportunity in this region to use biofuels. So these are some of the challenges that the city has at the moment and where a lot of work is being done. And now just to finish off and to give someone else a turn to speak, the topics where I think there is a lot of work left to be done in Rafaela would be to encourage more sustainable food, to improve in urban planning and architectural planning. Rafaela was born in the early 19th century, so it has a lot of shortcomings in energetic terms, but it is a city that imports all of the food that it consumes, which of course poses a challenge for all areas of the city. And the threat of this monoculture of soy is of course always present. There's the need to make the soil more fertile because it's been subject to a lot of agrochemicals. This will require more public sector leadership to improve the quality of the soil. The city also intends to educate others on social and economic aspects. It's improving not only in citizen awareness, but also it's sharing its message with other cities. I think this gives you a good idea of the city and what it's doing. There's plenty of information about it on the internet, and no doubt Pablo could also share more information about this and would be happy to answer questions as well.
No sé si Pablo querés agregar algo.
Pablo, would you like to share anything? No, that's great, Alex. We've been listening super carefully. Both Mailing and myself were saying that it would be very interesting for people from other continents, from Africa, for instance, because we have some people listening to us also from Asia who could perhaps share their point of view of whether they are understanding the message that you've shared and understanding this model of green economy. We were discussing with Paula earlier last week. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to hear from people from all over the world and learning from them. So hopefully someone maybe from Africa, from Asia could share their thoughts and tell us whether this is an understandable model. We've also heard a lot from European nationals already, but I just want to encourage everyone to take part anyway.
Excuse me, I just want to ask a question. So a group of people took the initiative. I want to ask, who started actually this vision of this city? Who started designing the new city of in which we learned a lot about amazing presentation? Who took the decision? Is it a state? Is it a municipal? Is it a private institution, university? Who took the lead in the first step?
Pablo.
Como quieras, Ale. Bueno.
Well, I could answer, or
Como planteaba
well,
Ale,
in
es una-
actual fact, as Alex was saying, this city has been rethinking its policies for quite a long time, and 20 years ago it established a government that fostered leadership and dialogue, a really structured dialogue. So it promoted a lot of positive policies. So the first answer, Abdallah, was it was the public sector, but not only through dialogue. It also took a huge leap 10 years later during the first decade of this century, where it went from not only dialogue within the public sector, but also education, science, academia. So universities became involved, technological institutes also. And nowadays, it is a shared process. The state started with the leadership and the ability to foster these dialogues. And then another element came in, which we mentioned in our previous unit. And it was the fact that you have to put faces to these initiatives, because ultimately they are political leaders, facilitators, researchers who have a face and have a name. And I insist on that. Do we have the people? Yes, in Rafaela we did. We trained them, we qualified them. So there was institutional leadership, and then there were individual people who really made the effort of making a change in our cities, because it requires a lot of people. I think that more or less answers your question. Alex invited me to answer this not only as the coordinator, but also as the regional coordinator of this Rafaela initiative. So I have first-hand knowledge of this. But there's a lot to learn from this city about how to structure these kind of initiatives. Octavi has also made a comment, just in case anyone would like to read that out. Yes, Octavi from Barcelona has shared a few ideas, a few points in common between Barcelona and Rafaela. Of course, the context is different in the sense that Rafaela was lacking a certain regulatory framework that Barcelona did have. And that it also has a lot of debt. But fortunately, that it has been possible to create good results, especially in terms of waste management. Placing the responsibility on producers, this extended producer responsibility concept has been very important. Alex, if you could just speak a little bit louder, we can't hear you very well. I was saying that this lack of a national regulatory framework has had a lot of influence, and this extended producer responsibility has been important so that people become more aware of the importance of recycling their products. This means that local bodies, local actors have managed to improve their results, have managed to develop indicators, and the ability to revalue certain materials. Because with renewables, Rafaela, for example, has a lot of potential to develop biofuel and to be more self-sufficient. It could develop bioethanol, biogas. Argentina, however, has a limit to the amount of renewables. So there are some conditioning factors that are preventing this policy from being fully developed.
No sé si hay alguna pregunta más o un
I'm
comentario.
not sure if there are any more questions or any comments.
Ahí tiene Laura, Ale, no sé si la estás viendo. Yo la
Yes,
tengo.
Laura has her hand raised. I'm not sure if you can see her. We could give the floor to Laura. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My question is largely linked to all of this work you've been doing in Rafaela. How did you structure, how did you organize this? And how did you bring it to the economic, environmental, political sphere? Because we've been working on all that, but we've been doing it separately. We've had technicians from one area, technicians from another, but we haven't really succeeded in really structuring it to make it integrated rather than sectorized. Well, we haven't achieved that either yet. As I was saying,
Y el programa Rafaela Emprende
the
convergieron de
programs to make Rafaela more sustainable and to foster entrepreneurship managed to converge just this year after working for 10 years on a separate basis. And I think maybe the pandemic helped that to happen. So having politics linked to new companies, guiding entrepreneurs to develop new capacities, new capabilities. This wasn't really linked at the time to a green economy, but this year it has suddenly managed to converge and come together. So it's going to be interesting to see what we can achieve now with this integrated approach. And one of the topics that's on a lot of agendas for young people, which we were surprised by, was how many people signed up to this decided to join this Rafaela Green program, and now awareness is being raised and it's becoming much more visible for more people.
Bueno, a ver si hay alguien más.
Let's see if anyone else would like to share anything.
Pablo.
Vamos bien. Creo
Okay,
que
well, I think we're doing well. We've got about 10 minutes left to end our hour-and-a-half session. There's a very nice comment from Octavi in the chat box. And, oh, it's just moved. Octavi was talking about the basic triangle to drive change, which is leadership, shared territorial vision, and dialogue. And Alicia said the presentation was excellent, Alejandro. And she shares this idea of the triple helix, government, university, and businesses, and that it is crucial to really draw on that territorial specialization, which is a very important challenge. So just to sum up some of our ideas, I'd first like to thank Mei Ling and Alex for all their week of work, the effort, the hard work that they've put into preparing all the materials and to adapting them to the specificity of this course. And they've also worked very quickly as a team. So I'd also like to thank our students today, and once again, thanks to everyone for working over the weekend as well. I would advise the students to read the feedback that they've got from Alex and from Mei Ling. Take a little bit of time out of your busy schedules to read the platform, because a learning process comes from the teachers, it comes from the material you read, but it comes also very significantly from this exchange of experiences. And that is something we can achieve on the platform. And the platform that has been designed by Mei Ling and Alejandro for this webinar especially, I'm sure that they'll be very happy to carry on discussing. There's always some observations that come in a little bit later. And I'd like to say thanks to everyone who's taken part, to the students, to the teachers. This week, we're going to be starting with the solidary economy with an Andalusian gentleman, Juan de Dios García Serrano, who is a man with a lot of experience on this topic. Paula and I will be uploading the content this afternoon, and I'd invite you to give it a read and to get involved, of course. We'll also be sending out a satisfaction survey to see whether we're getting things right or where we could improve. And I'd also like to mention that next week, next Monday, there won't be a webinar because we're organizing a very big webinar where Paula and I are we're just juggling a bit with our timetables. So we'll let you know over the coming week of when that will be. But I think we're making progress. Paula, would you like to add anything, or would any of the students like to mention anything? We'll be informing everyone through the platform. And Alejandro, Maylin, we can conclude now if you're happy to. No, well, I'd just like to encourage everyone who has a government function or who guides a local government. It is really very important, very urgent to be able to lobby a bit more in public policies, not only on the environment, but regarding the challenge of the economy. So I'd like to encourage you to be pioneers in this respect. Maylin, I think you're going to have to conclude. I'm not sure whether you were prepared to do that, but I think you can take responsibility for concluding this.
Bueno, como decía Pablo, estamos súper
Well, yes, as Pablo was saying, we are fully available to carry on reading your comments, to send you out any further information you might want.
Nos nutre a nosotros.
This
Vimos
also gives us a lot to learn from as well. We take a lot from these experiences you share, so we want to stay in touch. And we are keen followers of all the initiatives that you've been sharing. We are keen drivers of changes at the territorial level. So as Alejandro was saying, I'd like to encourage you all to take part. This is a really important task that you're doing. It's important to raise social awareness as well and to understand how we can work together, and that the role each of us play is fundamental. Well, yes, that's all, I think. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you also to the interpreters who are there behind the scenes, although we can't see them. So thank you for translating all this content in our multilingual, multicultural efforts to communicate and to move forward in municipalities around the world. So fond regards from me.
Gracias.
Goodbye to everyone. Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.